This lesson, we're looking at angle rules again, and this is lesson 6, calculating angles on parallel lines. And in this lesson, we're going to be looking at two angle rules in particular, okay? And these are alternate and corresponding angles, okay? So let's jump right in. So first of all, let's recap what parallel lines are. So parallel lines are lines that never touch, okay? So if you were to continue drawing these lines, and if they never touch, that means they are parallel, okay? And a way we symbolize parallel lines, because if we look at these two lines here, they look like they're never going to touch, but it's really hard to tell sometimes with pictures. So in maths, if we ever have parallel lines, we will put two arrows on them, and that means that they are parallel, okay? So these two lines here, they are parallel, okay? Let's look at two other lines now. So these two lines, we can see the line at the top comes down at an angle, and the line below it seems to be going straight across, but actually they both touch at this point here, okay? So that means they are not parallel because they touch, okay? So touch equals no parallel, or equals not parallel, okay? And let's have a look at another set of lines. So we've got two more lines here. Now, if we look at these two lines, they're not actually touching currently, are they? So there's no point of these two lines that are actually touching each other. But if we were to extend these lines, like so, we can clearly see that they would touch here, okay? So because they touch equals not parallel. Therefore, these lines are not parallel, okay? But you don't need to worry, because like I said, in any question, there will be, if there's two lines next to each other, we will tell you if they are parallel because they will have a little arrow on them pointing in the same direction, okay? So, angles on a parallel lines. So here now we're going to talk about the different angle rules that you can get for this topic, okay? So the first one is alternate angles. Now, if you have two angles, like so if we look at the angle at the bottom first, we can see that this angle is on if we focus on this line in the center, the angle at the bottom is to the right of this line, and it's pointing up, if you will, okay? And the angle at the top, it's on the left of the line and it's pointing down, okay? So one's on the right and pointing up, and the other's on the left and pointing down, okay? So we call these angles alternate angles, okay? And the first angle rule states that these angles, if you have two parallel lines and a line coming down, these two angles will be the same. So if I call this x, then this will also be x, okay? If this angle was 30, this other angle would also be 30, okay? Now, a nice easy way to remember these angles is if we draw all the lines that these angles use to be made, we get a Z shape, okay? So we call the alternate angle rule, we also call them Z angles or Z angles, okay? Now the next rule is corresponding angles. So if we have two angles like so, this time if we focus on our line that separates that goes between the parallel lines, we have two angles, and they're both on the right hand side of this line, and they're both pointing in the same direction, okay? They're both pointing down and right, if you will, okay? So we call these corresponding angles. And what that means is that these are equal. So if the bottom angle was y, the top angle would be y. If the bottom angle was 30, then this top angle would be 30, sorry, not 40. If the bottom angle was 150, then the top angle would also be 150, okay? Now, an easy way to remember this angle is if we highlight all the lines that are involved with these angles, we get an F shape. So these are corresponding angles, or F angles, if you will, okay? The last rule, this isn't a proper rule. We're not going to spend too much time dwelling on this, but these are just called opposite angles, okay? And now they're not strictly on parallel lines, but they're true for any sort of shape. If you have two lines crossing each other, they make a sort of X shape like this. The two angles opposite each other will be equal. So for example, if this bottom angle was X, then the top angle would be X. So the angle opposite would also be X as well. If this angle was 40, then this top angle would also be 40 as well. And the same is true for the other two angles left over, okay? So for this blue angle, now if that was Y, the other blue angle would also be Y. The blue angle was 130, the bottom angle would also be 130, okay? So these are called opposite angles. So let's have a look. So these are our three angle rules, okay? So the main two are alternate angles and corresponding angles, but we're also going to be using some opposite angles in this lesson, okay? Let's have a look at some examples. So we're given a shape here, two parallel lines, and we're given an angle of 110 degrees, an angle X. And we're being asked to find X and state the angle used, okay? So the first thing you should do is you should draw a line showing what lines are used to make the angles that we know or we're trying to find, okay? So if I was to draw a line now, tell you what, use a different color than purple, it's very similar. If I use this red line, comes up and across there, and this line comes up and across here. It looks like I've got an F shape, doesn't it? So that means I'm going to be using the corresponding angles rule, okay? So first of all, I'm going to say corresponding angles. Corresponding angles. Therefore, so if we look at this diagram here, we can see that the angles in the nooks of the letter F are equal. So that must mean that X is equal to 110 degrees, okay? Because they're both this blue angle, okay? So they have to be equal to each other, okay? Let's have a look at the next example. So we're being asked to find X and state the angle, okay? Now, if we look at this, I can see that there are two angles and they're both opposite each other, okay? So that must mean I'm going to have to use the opposite angle rules, okay? So opposite angle rules, or opposite angles. Therefore, X is equal to 75 because it is opposite the angle 75, okay? So therefore X is 75 degrees, okay? Next example. So it's not super obvious which angle rule we have to use. So let's draw in some lines, okay? So we start at the top. We're going to go across, go across the angle, then across the bottom angle. Now it looks like I'm using a Z. It looks like I've got a Z shape here, okay? So that means I'm going to be using the alternate angle rules, okay? So the rule I'm going to state is alternate angles. Therefore, angle X has to be equal to 65 degrees because those are alternate angles and they are equal to each other, okay? If I just color it in green, just like the diagram on the right, okay? So because they're alternate angles, they're going to be equal to each other, all right? Next one. So now we need to find X and Y and state the angle rules used, okay? So first of all, let's start with angle Y, okay? So the angles aren't opposite each other, it's next to it. But what do we notice about this line here? Well, it's a straight line, isn't it? And we should remember that angles on a straight line, or straight line angle, sorry. Straight line angles. Straight line angles, they add up to 180 degrees. Okay, that was from a lesson a couple of lessons ago. So therefore, 130 plus y equals 180. Therefore, that means that y is equal to 50 degrees because 130 plus something is 180. So that means that y is 50 degrees, okay? Now, what about x? We still need to find x now, okay? Now, this one, again, it isn't super obvious, but if we draw in the lines, it might help us out a little bit. So we've got this line here, going up there, and a line there. Now, it may not look like we've used this shape before, but actually what we've got is an upside down F. Okay, so here's the shape here. And if I was to rotate this shape, we would have an F shape, okay? So this here is an F angle, is a corresponding angle or an F angle, okay? So to find angle X, we're going to be using corresponding angles. Okay, I'm going to color them in blue just to remind you all. So because they're corresponding, they're going to be little blue angles. Therefore, X is equal to 130 degrees, okay? Because X and 130 degrees are corresponding angles, that means they're equal to each other, okay? Let's look at one more example. So here we go. We need to find X and Y again, okay? So let's start off with angle X at the top. So for angle X, so what rule can we use for this one? Well, it looks like they're opposite each other. So for angle X, we're going to use opposite angle rules, or just opposite angles. Opposite angles, okay? So therefore, the three dots mean therefore, okay? X equals 58 degrees. Job done, all right? Now, let's write in 58 degrees here. So for angle Y now, so what angle rule are we going to use for this one, okay? Well, let's draw in the lines first so we know what we're looking for. So those are the lines for angle Y, and those are the lines for angle X, okay? And it looks like we've got an F shape here. Therefore, we're going to be using corresponding angles again. Okay, so that must mean if these are corresponding angles, that must mean that angle Y is equal to X. And we know that X is now 58 degrees. So Y, so therefore, Y is equal to X, which is equal to 58 degrees. Therefore, Y equals 58 degrees. Okay, just like that. So here's the main task coming up now. So pause the video and have a go at these questions, okay? There's not much writing to do with these questions. Just draw a little diagram in your book of the question, and then just fill in the unknown angles as you go along, okay? And make sure you state the angle rules that you use, okay? So pause the video and have a go. Okay, here are the answers. Very well done if you got them all right. Now let's move on to the checking question. So here we're being asked to find X and state the angle rules used, okay? So you might have to use a couple of angle rules for this question, okay? So pause the video and have a go with this checking question. Okay, so clearly we don't have enough information here to find out straight away what angle X is compared to 65 degrees, okay? But let's try and find either a corresponding or interior angle, okay? So I think it would really help me out if I could find this angle here, okay? I'm going to call that Y. How can I find this angle? Well, if I look at the rest of the lines and I draw them in, I can see that I've got an F angle or a corresponding angle, okay? So the first angle rules I'm going to use is a corresponding angle. Therefore, I now know that Y equals 65 degrees, okay? Now I can start looking for angle X, okay? So X, what can I do for X? Well, I know angle Y is now, 65 degrees. Okay, so how can I find X now that I know that angle Y, or the angle next to it, is 65 degrees, okay? Well, it looks like X and Y are on a straight line. Okay, let's get rid of the other lines. It looks like X and Y are on a straight line, okay? So that means all angles on a straight line add up to 180 degrees, okay? So straight line angles. Okay, so therefore, x plus y equal 180 degrees, okay? Now we know y is 65, so x plus 65 degrees equals 180 degrees, okay? So something plus 65 is 180, and that is going to be 115 degrees, okay? So therefore, x equals 115 degrees, so that's the final answer, okay? So very well done if you got that right. And actually, next lesson, we're going to learn a shortcut about how to answer this sort of question, okay? Because we can actually solve this question in one step, okay? And we're going to learn about that rule next lesson, okay? But if you found 115 degrees, very well done. And we'll see you next lesson. Bye now.